Hey friends, this is Jim here with Science Talk. I want to share with you this new paper that came out. I'm sure you probably heard something similar in the news, such as, oh, there's going to be 1 million species extinct and that kind of deal. And human civilization is going to end by 2050 if we don't do things, to stop the climate change. And we've heard the reports of the ice sheets are collapsing, which they are melting much faster than we have expected or extrapolated to, predicted. Greenland is melting a lot faster than we thought. The ice sheets of Antarctica are becoming more and more unstable, and some of them are close to total collapse. The sea ice around Antarctica is disappearing. The sea ice in the Arctic is disappearing. The Chukchi Sea, for example, is on its way to becoming seasonally ice-free. That's unheard of. But that's what's going on. So, yeah, we could very well be setting up conditions that could bring about the end of human civilization in about, 30 years? Okay. Well, this recently, a new policy paper from an Australian think tank claims that those other reports are off. And one of the things that some of these other findings from research papers said that beer is going to become extremely expensive. Well, jolly, if there was anything that would spur people into action into tackling climate change, the cost of beer can't be expensive. Now, I don't drink beer, but anyway, a lot of scientists do. Beer Friday. But what this paper is saying from this Australian think tank is that the risks of climate change are much, much worse than previously considered. So according to the paper, climate change poses a near to mid-term existential threat to human civilization. And there's a good chance society could collapse as soon as 2050 if serious mitigation actions aren't taken in the next decade. That's rather strong language. Published by the Breakthrough National Centre for Climate Restoration in Melbourne, which is an independent think tank that does focus on climate policy. The authors are numerous climate researchers and, get a load of this, former fossil fuel executives. Interesting. The paper's central thesis is that climate scientists are too restrained in their predictions of how climate change will affect the planet in the near future. Now, recently, and I'm going to have more on this in a few seconds, the IPCC has been putting out some dire proclamations, if you will, of saying, oh, we got to do something by 2030, or it's, game's over, too late, we'll pass the tipping point. The IPCC has always historically underestimated or downplayed how dire the situation is. And for them to come out and say, in essence, holy shit, things are bad, it's like, well, things are probably really, really bad. Now, I have my issues with the IPCC, and that could be a whole nother video segment. But they're not my favorite organization, in case you. And for those of you who have watched my other videos, you were aware of this. But it is interesting that we have, well, of course, it is former fossil fuel executives. For them to come out and basically saying this is probably why they're no longer fossil fuel executives. And keep in mind, we have evidence that ExxonMobil, back in the 70s, knew that putting CO2 into the atmosphere from burning fossil fuel will warm the planet. They knew that back in the 70s. What did they do instead? They embarked on a campaign of disinformation to basically throw a lot of quote-unquote doubt into the general public, because a lot of people are not scientifically trained, and sad to say, not scientifically literate. And the campaign has been successful. There are so many climate change deniers out there that they think they grab onto this one little modicum of a scientific concept that they don't understand well, and they run with it basically to prove their point, which they don't. I got into a recent battle with someone who called me a pseudoscientist and of creating a hoax and being a scaremonger because I talked about methane coming out of the permafrost. So I fired back with all guns blazing. I basically told him to F off. And I usually don't get that way, but I basically have had it. It's just, it's just, first of all, to call me doing pseudoscience, that's defamation of character, and that's actually open to libel. And I know some scientists who have actually taken a step. We've had it. Now, some of us, yeah, we tend to talk in a dry language, and we kind of, well, with probably 95% chance and the probability of this, and the results indicate. That's how we talk. That's our language, but it doesn't convey the urgency to the general public. So some of that's on us for on our basis saying, hey, we're screwing up the works, and this is what the hell is really happening. But the other issue is, as we learn, as we get more data, as we improve our analytical tools and improve our analyses and improve our modeling, we then get to, and more data comes in, we get to realize, oh shit, it really is bad. And it's a lot worse than we thought. So now there is a general campaign, if you will, to really communicate exactly how dire things are. So back to this. Okay. So this think tank says the current climate crisis is larger, more complex than any humans have dealt with before. General climate models like the one that the United Nations Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, used in 2018 to predict that a global temperature increase of basically 2 degrees C, which is 3.6 Fahrenheit, could put hundreds of millions of people at risk, fail to account for the sheer complexity of Earth's many interlinked geological processes, and you might want to say geochemical biological processes, all linked together. As such, they fail to adequately predict the scale of the potential consequences. The truth, the authors wrote, is probably far worse than any models can fathom or indicate. And the other thing to keep in mind with this is that the increase in temperatures and the effects that it has is not linear. We're starting to see, the rate of Greenland ice melt, for example, is increasing exponentially, as an example. So that then further exacerbates things and actually shortens the time frame for which humans have to act. So there's that. And then to invoke basic concepts of chaos theory, any small, slight changes in initial conditions, any slight perturbations that are different can give you a completely different result. So I could have the exact same conditions here, exact same parameters, exact same measurements, etc. And I could let it run, let the system run one way. But if I just tweak something just ever so tiny, I get a completely different result. I'll give you an example. And please, young soccer players, do not try this at home. Get a can of paint, open can of paint, full gallon. Put it in the garage floor. Again, don't do this. And then kick a soccer ball at it. And then look at the pattern. Okay, you might want to put up a sheet, drop cloth or something. I can do this for, I can get the same can of paint, the same colors, the same pigmentations, okay? Put it at the same spot. Let's say I had a mechanical device that delivers the soccer ball at the paint can at precisely the same impact velocity, the same energy, same location on the can. And if I look at the splatters, they're going to be different. And why is that? Changes in slight conditions of the interactions with the paint molecules, maybe little slight variations in the viscosity of the paint itself. So now you take something that's a very simple example, extrapolate that to the planet, and look how many possible interactions it could be. And you get an idea of how complex things are. So this is why when I hear the latest geoengineering scheme, I just throw my hand up and they say, well, people never learn. They're just unforeseen parameters, unforeseen interactions. You cannot predict what the outcome is going to be. You think you can. You think, oh, if I do this, this, and that, this will be the result. No, you don't know that because of the unforeseen interactions. You just don't know it. So, geoengineering is bad. I'll just leave it at that. But the essence of that, we're now finding that there's so many other ramifications from what we're doing. You know, I've had arguments with people basically saying that, well, a warmer world is great for the plants. We're going to grow more food. No. Plants, like all organisms, have a preferred temperature range. And with the exception of corn, which is a C4 plant, most of our plants are C3 based. Now, C3, C4 refers to the type of biochemical reactions that go on inside the plant as it makes glucose and other chemicals. I'm not going to get into that. But C3 plants do not like it much warmer than 86 degrees Fahrenheit. You start getting above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, well, the stomata stay open longer, so they desiccate. But what happens is that crop yields decrease and the quality of the food decreases. And studies are showing this. So, again, this is a case of people not being scientifically literate. I'm not saying we should all be scientists, that would be boring, but we should at least know basic science. So, let's see what else this think tank is sharing. So, what might an accurate worst-case picture of the planet's climate adult future actually look like? The authors provide one particularly grim scenario that begins with world governments, and this is their words, politely ignoring the advice of scientists and the will of the public to decarbonize the economy, meaning finding alternative energy sources, renewable, resulting in a global temperature increase of 3°C, that's 5.4 Fahrenheit, by 2050, not even 2100, 2050. We're already like at 1.8 as it is now. Some speculate that by 2025 we'll blow past 2. At this point, 3°C increase, the world's ice sheets vanish, brutal droughts kill many of the trees in the Amazon rainforest, which is a carbon offset. Now, of course, Bolsonaro is helping along with burning the damn place down, which is criminal, to be blunt. And then this sets up a feedback loop, positive feedback loop. And positive doesn't mean good. Positive means the runaway system of ever hotter, ever deadlier conditions. What's interesting is that the warmer the air gets, it can hold more moisture, but it also lots of times sucks the moisture out of the ground. So you get dry ground, lightning strike, boom, place goes up. Or a lot of moisture in the air, and with the slowing jet streams, low pressure systems tend to linger, dumping more precipitation. I have another story upcoming about how jet streams are slowing down. And if you look at the recent video series I just did on the oscillatory systems of the planet, I discuss, especially in conjunction with the Arctic oscillation, the North Atlantic oscillation, the Arctic dipole, how the jet stream is going from more zonal to more meridional flow and slowing down. I've done stories where I basically have shared with you the information that dry areas get drier, wet areas get wetter with climate change. 35% of the global land area, 55% of the global population are subject to more than 20 days a year of lethal heat conditions beyond the threshold of human survivability, the authors put forth. They hypothesize that. Meanwhile, droughts, floods, wildfires regularly occur, regularly ravaging the land. Nearly 1/3 of the world's land surface turns to desert. Entire ecosystems collapse, beginning with the planet's coral reef. We've seen that already with the bleaching. The rainforests and the Arctic ice sheets. World's tropics are hit hardest by this new climate extreme, destroying the region's agriculture, turning more than 1 billion people into refugees. So basically, you're going to turn a lot of places on land areas into uninhabitable regions. There is speculation that the Middle East by 2060 will become too hot for anyone to live. So now you're going to have mass migration out of there. And of course, the more and more people you put on the planet, the more energy requirements they're going to need, which puts a ever greater strain on finite resources that are decreasing. This is not sustainable. Please look at the video I posted just a short while ago on carrying capacity. The mass movement of refugees coupled with shrinking coastline, with sea levels rising, not only from the melting ice, but thermal expansion of the water, and severe drops in food and water availability begin to stress the fabric of the world's largest nations, including the U.S. You will have armed conflicts over resources. Water will be one of them. Perhaps culminating in nuclear war are likely. So this is rather dire. The result, according to the new paper, is outright chaos and perhaps the end of human global civilization as we know it. How can this catastrophic vision of the future be prevented? Only with the people of the world accepting climate change for the emergency it is and getting to work immediately. That's a climate crisis. Now, all us scientists can do is go out there, we collect the data, we analyze it, we present our findings, and we give our recommendations. And we give our projections of what's coming down the pike. Scientists don't make policies. That's the politicians. Politicians have to listen to us scientists who are making the recommendations, and they say, get your asses in gear. And this is where you also need the people pressuring the politicians to do the right thing. And we're seeing some movements of this. According to the paper's authors, the human race has about 1 decade left to mount a global movement to transition the world economy to a zero carbon emissions system. Achieving zero carbon emissions requires either not emitting carbon or balancing carbon emissions with carbon removal. The effort required to do so would be akin in scale to the World War II emergency mobilization, the authors wrote. Now, a new policy paper was endorsed with a foreword by Admiral Chris Barry, who is a retired Australian Defence Chief, senior Royal Navy commander, who has testified before the Australian Senate about the devastating possibilities climate change poses to national security and overall human well-being. Now, what's interesting here in the U.S. is you have the GOP, a bunch of climate change deniers. The Pentagon, military branch, has basically said climate change, global warming, is a national security threat. This is the defense people. So Admiral Barry said, I told the Senate inquiry that after nuclear war, human-induced global warming is the greatest threat to human life on the planet. Human life on Earth may be on the way to extinction in the most horrible way. Well, that's cheery. But probably not far off the mark. So, yeah, things of that. I constantly see new reports and new studies. It's almost overwhelming, and I kind of try to select, you know, what I can to share with you. But the reports that are constantly coming in are just mind blowing as to how screwed up things are and how humans have really messed things up. And when I hear people saying, "Oh, the Earth has natural cycles," yeah, that's true. It's the rate of change. I keep stressing that. The rate of change is the fastest we see in the records. Whether it's sediment cores, ice cores, dendrological cores, tree rings, taking wood out of trees. When you look at that, when you look at running mass spec analysis and trap gas, when you're looking at isotopic fractionation, we're seeing the fastest rate of change ever that cannot be explained by natural cycles. I did some time ago a video on Milankovitch cycle, and I did a part 2 where Milankovitch does not explain what we're seeing now, but if you look at what human activity is doing, burning fossil fuel, it does explain what we're seeing now. And actually, according to the Milankovitch cycle, Earth should be cooling down, and we're warming up. Now, granted, that does make teasing out the signal easier, anthropogenic versus natural cycle. But if Milankovitch was to predict that Earth would be warming up and we're doing what we're doing now, we'd really be in deep shit. So people just, I think a lot of it is denial, but the thing is, you gotta look at the data. This is what the data is telling us. So when someone says, well, CO2 is in the atmosphere, whatever, I go, yeah, and we can tell from isotopic fractionation, the source of every single CO2 molecule. We can tell if it's anthropogenic or biogenic. We can do that. And we're seeing more and more CO2 molecules in the atmosphere that are anthropogenic. Humans are really altering the climate system of this planet. And as is one sign in the institute that I used to work at, always had on there, was saying, a good planet is hard to find. This is our only home, and we're screwing it up big time. Thank you for your time. Hey folks, this is a reminder to please share my videos with others, and to also please tell others of my channel. Please subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so that you receive notifications when I upload new videos. I also hope that you will consider supporting the work that I do and supporting this channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com. Details in the description box below. Thank you for your support.